Our next speaker is Mr. John Roberts. He comes from the National Department of Water and Sanitation. So he'll be able to give us another perspective on this whole question, all these questions that we're facing. He's been assigned the manager of integrated water resource management, initially for the Breedenburg, Overberg area. But since 2015, he's been assigned to disaster risk management reduction within the bulk water use sectors, irrigation, industrial and domestic use in the Western Cape. So a very authoritative person. John, thank you very much.
Thank you. As many others have alluded, I'm probably the enemy in the meeting. Kindly, whenever you want to attack me, do this frank and open. I will try and not be too defensive. Unfortunately, when you are sitting in the chair of national government, there are a lot of things that you as a person would want to say, in your personal capacity, but may not say. And there's other things that you can say, but you cannot say. So in a one-on-one discussion, we can share many things, but in a presentation as a representing national department, it's a different story. I am also one of the fortunate members that have worked in the old regime, the prior 94 session, as of 1983, and now in the post-94 era, in the sense that I've now captured more than 40 years service and is also close to retirement, although my genetics may give you a different story. Just let us run. I always battle to make ends meet in meetings and timeline, which is your graphic up. Okay, just can I use the roaming mic? Okay, this is better. Hello. Just in an oversight is that we're dealing with the background of water resource protection, and that deals with the reserves and ecologies and classifications and ecological classes. And there are far more educated people in this audience on this topic than I am. I'm a manager, and I talk from a management position and a practical implementation position. The determination of various facets of the ecology, the ecological reserves, comes down to implementation at the end of the day. And if you can't find the interface between science and engineering and implementation, that leaves you standing on the side of the shore and watching the others swim. So, from the introduction of the National Water Act, and actually prior to that, in all the consultations that were held with public stakeholders and input in various role players like Dr. Preston and others, and Dr. Turton involved in the Water Act and the legislation related writings, there was a preferential or primary allocation given to the environment. What it actually entails is a whole different ballgame. But nonetheless, you need to classify the resource, you need to set quality objectives, you then have a reserve, be it in a preliminary phase, in a rapid, intermediate, whatever, and then a final reserve. And all of this is overseen under the National Water Resources Strategy, under the Water Act, under the Constitution. So implementation is a different story, which is that. The definition in large, and I'm going to run through many of these things very fast. I believe, Cloden, are the presentations available to everybody? Are the presentations available after this to people? Okay, then you can read in your own leisure. Reserves means the quantity as well as the quality of water required to sustain basic human needs. That is not water for whatever you want to do in domestic or urban area. that is only water for 25 liters per capita per day. So if you have 10,000 people here and a potential another 10,000 in 20 or 30 or 40 years, that is against the 25 liters per person per day cap that is set aside. It's the same that if everything else fails and there's no other water, that people will still be able to drink and bath, and not bath, but wash themselves and make food. But not for industrial purposes, not for golf courses, not for car washes, not for all the other things that use a lot more water. The other part of that is to protect the aquatic systems in order to achieve ecological sustainability, and then the word comes for development and use. That means if you set the reserve, it enables new development and new use, or it limits existing use and development from a resource. It doesn't say, I'm now going to set a reserve, and when I've set the reserve, there's no more water allocation from the system unless you cannot meet the one or the other. The intentions of the reserve was to allow for the full and optimal and beneficial use of the water resource. Now, water resource in broader context is a river, groundwater, and in some cases initially an estuary. There's no other things. A dam is not a water resource. A dam is full from a water resource. A borehole is a source, but it's tapped from groundwater, which is a water resource. So for all of those, and in a water resource, you need to define a reserve for rivers, for wetlands, for groundwater, and for estuaries. And they all have their own toys, all have their own blocks that informs them. They're never the same. Rivers require certain water at certain flows, at certain heights, at certain rates, at certain reaches, in certain depths, in winter and in summer. Wetlands require water for inundation for certain periods of time and length of time to absolutely absorb, and wetlands are normally in rivers, so it's a different ballgame. Estuaries require freshening flows, scour flows, large volumes, whatever not, which is not conducive to what the river wants or the wetland wants that precedes the estuary. But those are all part, and then groundwater is either directly linked or indirectly linked or not linked. And it has an influence on base flow, it has an impact on estuaries. And to buy in all of those for implementation is a different ballgame. What is not intended for the reserve? The intention of a reserve is not to preserve water resources as pristine and untouchable. So the reserve is not to be set there and say, we cannot allocate water from this resource anymore, and it's now pristine, or we take it back to Adam and Eve's time before any human development. We remove all the infrastructure, we remove all the farming, we remove all the houses down here and say, here's the river back. In 20 years' time or 10 years' time, it will naturally be a river in pristine state. You will never be able to enjoy it because you won't see it. The reserve is not intended to prevent access to water. It doesn't say that you may not apply, but you may apply against certain conditions that can still meet the reserve. The reserve is not set by anybody else than the minister unless delegated to the Director General or a DDG or corporate services. The reserve is not negotiated. So it's not, I give you this and you give me that. So you can read, a reserve can be consulted, but it's not on a consensus basis to say, we've now argued the point and we have consensusly determined to be this. The scientists can do a lot of reserves and interpretations and modeling and everything for the department. But at the end of the day, the department has to make the decision and the minister has to take accountability to sign off the reserve. The common misconceptions are that the reserve is the enforcement tool. So if the water quality in a river is poor, or or there's sewage pollution, we can use the reserve to force somebody to fix it. Or we can use it to implement waste discharge charge systems that will give us additional charges so that we can spend more time in the regulatory framework of water quality management. The reserve is not a legal instrument to limit the utilization, I've covered that. The reserve will ensure resource protection and therefore it's sustainable. That's a misconception. It doesn't necessarily say that if I have determined that it will do that. There's a number of, let's call it puzzle pieces or in Afrikaans blokkies that I have to put together and I have to work with to put it in place to then review, mitigate, revise, and then follow an adaptive approach. The reserve must be complied with immediately. That's also a misconception. Once the reserve is determined and final, it doesn't necessarily mean now as of day, everybody must abide by this. All the rules change, it's now the reserve implemented as of immediately, or it must be implemented all the times or for all the resources. There's a process of implementation of the reserve, and that's unfortunately where a lot of science gets lost with the scientific determination and the implementation. For the institutions and or be it the catchment management agency or the departments where in absence of the agencies to implement the reserve, to change the rules of the past to give effect to the ecological waters. Prior to 1994, there were no allocation to ecology. There was environmental provisions made in certain state dams and environmental work done to make the dam beautiful again in the rivers, but there were no formal allocation made to the environment. It was only after the introduction of the new National Water Act. So the environment actually had the backbone of everything. It was the last guy in the road to find no food on the plate. So we have, but when you now give the opportunity that you're a primary thing, I believe that I can apply for everything. The reserve is not a function of impact on the resource, so it doesn't say if there's no impact, no resource, or no reserve. It has to be a determined figure, doesn't matter what the impact is. In some cases, the impact is so immense that river systems are classified as an E category, which puts you in a very poor state. There's no hope in hell to fix this river ever. Doesn't matter how much billions you throw into a resource or in a specific river, you're not going to get the river to be better. But you still have to do a reserve determination for that. And as previously said by Dr. Turton, you need to actually work towards trying to get something better. The reserve can be equal to zero. That is also a misconception. It can never be equal to zero. Remember that the reserve determines at certain river reaches. It's expressed as a percentage of the mean annual runoff, but it's implemented by a certain flow at a certain river reach at a certain time of the year. So expression of percentage can be confusing because it's easy to implement an expression of the mean annual runoff. Say at point A, I must implement 30% of the mean annual runoff. Yeah, sure, you want to take water, you must ensure that 30% goes down. Okay, that's easy. Because doesn't winter, summer, it goes through. But if it goes down to the actual flows per month, per season, per river reach, per rainfall region, per whatever, then it becomes a far more difficult process to implement and to monitor and to regulate. The reserve is not a fixture for largely modified rivers. The sustainability is the overarching idea of ecological reserve to ensure that the quality and quantity are there and in those conditions that limit the sustainability. Challenges are to pinpoint sustainability with the interface between the lots of reserves and the deviation from pristine. So you have no risk of damages, you need pristine catchments. Now, those pristine catchments or pristine rivers are normally above the first farmer's farm the birds on his farm. That's in the upper mountain catchments. If you move towards how workable or what workhorse a river is, in terms of dams and abstraction and industry and farming and all other entities taking it, then you move to more towards the damaged resource. And you need to find that sustainable limit as such. So if you relate it to the onerous, you're most likely on a C minus category at present, and your aims are to get it to a C plus or as possible. You'll never move into a B because that's moving towards a pristine catchment, and this will never be a pristine catchment again, unless we remove all the farming, remove all the dams, and everybody else that live off the river, right down to the estuary. Okay, I'll skip all of that stuff. Just as I said, we deal with surface water, wetlands, groundwater, estuaries. But the critical part here is the interaction or the integration or interface of all these reserves as determined with all their different parameters to get one picture of how do I implement it. That's why implementation should not only be faced at the estuary or at the river or at the wetland. It's a domino effect, it has a domino impact, and it has to be worked in partnership with the science and the engineering guys. From an engineering perspective, and we have a number of engineers here, ex-DWS engineers with lots of experience, we would want to build more weirs. From an environmental perspective, we want to build less weirs. To protect certain things, we want to put in more gauges. To monitor and to know and to measure, we need gauging. So this is a cross-cutting challenge. How do you protect the environment and conserve the environment, but also enable you to measure and to know and to gauge and not only have one control point, which is not controlled and is not properly managed, and there's nothing below. So we don't actually know what we get because there's no form of measurement. So you need to start putting in things, but sometimes you can put in things that is not concrete, but enables you to measure, which is biodegradable over time, but it still enables you. You may not measure in liters per second flow, you may measure 500 liters per second or 50 liters per second flow. It's what you actually want to achieve at the end of the day. Classification systems. The classification is to set a set of rules, focus on the specific water resource, with it consensus, transparency, accountability, and then the bottom line is you need to find a balance between protection and utilization. And this is the most difficult part, is also finding that balance is like a scale purpose, is that on the one side you've got conservation and protection and on the other side you've got farming, you've got urban needs, you've got industrial needs, you've got water for various purposes in life that you need to ensure that there's water for that economic benefits. But whilst keeping in mind that you have to look on the other side of the coin as well. The different classes, A class is pristine class, top of the mountain, no impact. Above, the only impact there is the baboons and some of the wildlife running around and the wild animals. But as you go down, you go to the degraded river systems, which is seriously modified as in the bottom picture, and also where you allow for trading or permanent trading or surrenderment of waters, like countries like Chile, where the bulk of the water is sold from the one country, one river basin to the adjacent country, and the remaining river becomes a cesspool. Only the return flows of going back to the river, the pristine waters are all transferred to adjacent countries. there are some of the legal questions. Is a resource significantly modified? Is it legally still considered as a resource? And or legally has a reserve? Must we look at the original state or must we look at the modified state? You must look at the modified state. You can't look at the original state and set a reserve for the regional, because then you will have to change everything and with significant economic impact to a number of years. You need to look at the modified state. What is the natural mean annual runoff? What is the virgin annual runoff? When was it stipulated? Natural means there's no development. If I add all the farms and all the dams and all the diversion weirs and everything else to the package and all the roads crossing and everything else, then I'm not natural anymore. So the volumes have changed. The yields have changed. The system has changed, and you have to be adaptive in your change as well. When a reserve determination is made on the resource and the resource charge changes, originally from flooding, do I need a new river? Do I need a new resource? If it's a new river, you need a new reserve. Doesn't matter if there was a final reserve signed off on the previous river, it's now a new river, it requires a new reserve. If a river is naturally modified through major flooding, and that river has changed its ways, like part of the owners, although the final reserve has signed off, you can now apply to have another reserve being considered against the modified river flow. So everything is not cast in stone. The only thing that's cast in stone is the day you die. Nothing else in life is cast in stone. I'm Dr. Turton. I'm giving you courtesy for this slide that you did some many years ago with a Mr. Allen in a presentation that was done by Mark Dent. Mark Dent is also a writer with a lot of experience and a university specialist that did a range of papers called the Mark Dent papers on catchment management agencies and water institutions, and where the intentions of catchment management agencies and the department and all these other institutions are going, and how it can influence, but also how it can bring scientists and other public parties with the sectors, with the institutions to work together. Because we've got two definite competition fields here. You've got an urban demand for more supply from the same resource. On the other side, you've got a natural resources protection side where we demand more and we want more. So it's two competing exercises. In the middle, we've got agriculture. They're also competing for the same resource with the same, probably with a similar volume of water, but from a different perspective. And it's also to at the end of the day say, if we don't need to meet each other and get together as science and institutions and local public and work together in terms of a common plan, we will not be able to implement anything. Integrated water resource management has three key objectives, which is ecological sustainability, economic efficiency, and social equity, which is then broken up into three elements. The enabling environment, what does it look like? The management instruments, how do I manage and what do I implement to manage? What partnership do I have? The CMA, the Catchment Management Agency, is signed for this area and the whole of the Western Cape for that matter now, within the jurisdictional management of resources, must have management instruments and must have partners on the ground. Partners that you can trust, that's going to tell you the right thing, or instrumentation, proper telemetric instrumentation. This flood that we've recently had in, not only in the Onrus, but in many rivers in the Atlantic zone of the Western Cape, if I may call it that way, the Berg River and part of the Breda and the Refusion End and some of the Overberg rivers. This has damaged not only estuaries and wetlands, it has damaged infrastructure. And in Onrus, the weir above the dam was partly washed away. It has recently been fixed by the farmer, but not to such effect that it can be measuring anything. The department will first and foremost have to ensure that whoever fixes it so that there's access for the department and there's access that it can be put back on the telemedic system, because it's a very key factor within managing the flows that's supposed to go bypassing the dam. Okay, where are we? What are likely to happen if we don't monitor, review, revise, and or implement? And we've discussed them earlier to say, sitting in new water acts, new acts, we have a tendency as the department and government in the whole, and I'm probably going to be fired for this, to continually strategize and strategize and strategize and re-strategize and re-strategize and never implement. We are revising the Water Act now. We're revising the sanitation. We're bringing in two new bills. But we haven't implemented half of the Water Act. We haven't implemented the giving effect to the ecological reserves. All what we've done, we have signed off the final reserves. It's implemented against new applications. It's not implemented against water users that receive their water in Simon van der Stel days or in the previous act. The act was intended to say we need to change the rules of the old to adapt to rules of the new to safeguard the water availability and sustainability for us all. Then, if you don't implement anything, it doesn't matter how much money it's going to cost. You need to start somewhere. Doesn't matter how many legal cases and fights you're going to have. You need to start somewhere. And if you can't start by putting in the right process, then start by putting in a process that can lead you towards the right process. Thank you. Okay, so there's always this graphic. When you ask anybody who wants to change, everybody wants to change. But if you ask them, are you willing to change? Then nobody wants to change. If you touch my door, and my plot, and my yard, I'm not buying into the change. But if you touch somebody else's, no, we all want change. But are you're not necessarily willing to change? You can't work towards problems and put aside some of the stuff. Please don't. Then, new allocations, new water is not a new diversion of water dividing. We're not taking the pot and saying, sorry, environment, you must get 30%, domestic, you had 100% of the water or 60% of it, you can now only get 40. It's not a new division. You need to take the existing in place and find out ways of how I can still allow you to use this, but not to the detriment of the other. So there's a different ball game. Unfortunately, I just had to take a swearing word in Moses. Right? But integrated water resource management means that we need to work together. In the slogan of the Springbok rugby team and our sports teams, we are only stronger together. We are weak if we fight each other all the time. If we don't work together, we can never achieve the end of the goals. But we need to visit our consequences. That's what we propose. The things that we presently put in the past actions. Many people are getting hidings today for the sins of their sons. I must come up for the municipality in one sense. None of these officials here and none of these councillors here implemented the rules and or followed a certain process. They came in here, this is the process. They continued using the same things. And now they get tired because they in the check. The same with, I've had a different fight with Tewatersloop municipality. In 1977, we built the Elandskloof Dam as a compromising factor for the farmers that we expropriated along the left embankment of the Theewaterskloof Dam. And we put in different schemes. The government, all engineers decided, okay, we need to buy out the pipeline servitudes before the time. Because it's a pipeline and a canal system on both sides of the valley. That's in Belize, by the way, if you're not familiar. We bought out these servitudes for the potential pipelines. Now the servitude areas are no-go development, 20 meters in width. We're going to put in there pipelines of a meter diameter and or more that has to supply water to agriculture and to the local town of Belize. And then we built the scheme. After we purchased all these things, registered everything else. Over time, people start getting agitated. We've got this 5 lanes of national roads running through my town that I can't build anything on because it's a water servitude limiting development in favor of park. You've now already built the pipeline. Can't you just give us a relaxation on that? Just make it 5 meters. Okay, you want to take the limit here from 20 to 5, we'll make it 8. We need 4 meters on both sides, but no development, no housing, no roads, nothing on this. This is to safeguard the community. This is to safeguard everybody. If that pipeline fails, I need to get in here quickly with machinery and fix it. I cannot now start removing guys' houses and his swimming pool and his backyard and his Mercedes Benz and whatever to get to access. And if I can't do that, you're not going to have water for a number of days. And we corrected. 20 years later, the same municipality came. Different boys. Can't you just move it to 4 meters? We want to develop here, and we're putting our houses here, and so forth. But it's indicated in our plans, but we'll keep the grace there, 4 meters, it's probably sufficient. So we graced them 4 meters. Then they put the urban out over the pipeline, and the first guy that signed the deed of transfer between the municipality and the new owners of those plots. So, but here's the restriction. I cannot build anything here. I cannot use this piece of my yard because there's a pipeline in there. I don't know how big it is and for what it is, but it's there. So what did the municipality do? They drew a line through it. And they signed next to it. Unfortunately for them, they signed next to it. And they took it out of any transfer title deed. And they sold those properties without any of those users knowing that there's a pipeline. Last year, August, the line had a burst. Line is 4 meters underneath the ground. So it gushes up. What's up top? Guy's double garage. His BMW. His dad. The guy's next door's double-story house, which he built over the pipeline. Approved by the same municipality. They don't know what their sons did or their fathers did before. And now somebody must pay. Now, the waterfed is not our problem. Infrastructure branch, which problem is actually, it's not on our assets register, so it's not our problem. Municipality says it's not our problem. The farmers must pay. The farmers need to fix the pipe, but it's not their problem to pay for associated damages that were caused because you transgressed the rule. Now the municipality is angry with me. They want to take me to task because I'm putting them in a bad light. You can't say, here's the proof. You go prove that it's not you. Right? We cannot keep on paying your damages. Okay, there's these models that we have applied that looks at the issues and responses. What are the drivers? What are the impacts? Where's the pressure? Where the states lie? What are the responses? And Anthony is probably far better to speak on these type of things. Looking at the imbalances, you look at the driver, what informs, where are the pressures, where's my water balance and my impact, and then you deal with the water imbalance, you deal with the impact on water equality and also the aquatic quality. And you look at all the various fields differently to come up to say, common drivers, common processes, common resolve, what are the easiest, cheapest ways to first implement? Johan made a statement that he gets thrown the book, he gets all these processes. Sometimes it's also just, who do I phone? Do I phone the same guy, or do I phone somebody that can tell me how can I get to do this thing on a different way and still be compliant? Or how much is the fine? Now, I'm coming to my last two slides. So what? Okay. But we wait another 25 years. The Water Act has been in place for 25 years. We've got a reserve, final reserve signed off. When do we start implementing this thing? If we wait 25 years from now, most of us will not be here anymore to enjoy that. But our kids maybe. But we may not necessarily have what we have here, because the environment is changing. There's going to be more migration to the Western Cape, because we're still in a far better management position from an institutional side than the half of the rest, or more than 80% of the rest of the country. The possible solutions are, and actually the solution by the letter of the law, is call for compulsory licensing. That means everybody gets considered against their allocation from the resource. And that makes changes. It needs to change. You can't have an ecological flow only at the dam, because all the ecological flows above is used for irrigation only. Everything is irrigated. So all the flows that run from the mountains that feed the same source of river that has to flow into the dam, all needs to contribute to the ecology, needs to contribute to the and contribute to the flow in the river that can actually be transferred. Cannot be held, because I'm the biggest son or the oldest son, I'm held responsible for all my brothers and sisters that lives in the same house. Your father used to do it, or you might do it with your own children. The oldest always gets more ID because he should know better, right? And he should do the better thing. But compulsory licensing is a very expensive process, and it's a time-consuming process. You need to do a capital management strategy, you need to do a plan, you need to do modeling, you need to calculate all those figures over. You need to look at how do I incrementally fix it from the mountain to the ocean, and then work back from the ocean to the mountain to work out where my things, what to implement and how to allocate. Then everybody has to get a formal license with conditions, monitoring, regulations, everything else that comes with it. Potentially you will, not potentially, you will have legal appeals from agriculture, from the city, from the urban areas, from other areas. There will be. It's not a question that you will just acknowledge the government now only gives you 80% of the water that you used to have. And now you have to suddenly find the other 20%. Or you must cut back on your agricultural development, or you must seize further development in a town, or limit people from using water. Then the alternate solution is, you need to find an adaptive project. There are various ways to enhance the flows of this river downstream of the dam and from at the dam under the new legislation. Start implementing things. You said you've done some alien clearing next to the wetlands, but if I look at Campbell's property, it's infested with aliens. The bulk of the riparian zone from the farming practice running into the estuary is infested with aliens, big, large-scale blue gum trees absorbing all the fresh inflows into the estuary. Put in gauging where there to gauge how much water I'm actually getting into the estuary. Monitoring points at various points. So there's a number of suites of things that can be implemented in short time with support. If we don't do that, we're going to be here. Okay? We're not visiting the consequences. It's essential to learn. And we all going to sit there. Thank you.